welcome to the Sharp Way Show. Yes, it is 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and that means you should be looking at me. That's important. You should know that. That is the rule. I do make the rules. I make the rules and enforce them. I am a tyrant. You need to be watching me at 7 p.m. It does matter, so thank you so much for joining me. Tonight, I am touching a topic that a lot of people don't touch, particularly in this world, but it's a critical one. It's the idea of leadership, what that actually means, how valuable it is, and how we're able to move people in a group. And the most important piece here is, as you guys know, I am blatant libertarian. I don't want to order you around. I want you to want to follow me. I want you to want to be led by the right people in the right way. And I want to be led, and I want you to lead me. I want us all to be doing the right thing to the best of our ability. So I have scoured the earth for someone who could give me some insight on this. And I have found someone. He is a leadership coach. He's an author. He's a podcast host, the man himself, Jamy Bechler. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Larry. I hope that my wife is listening or watching this right now and heard that introduction. I hope that she appreciates what she's got. No, but
there we go.
But great. You couldn't have said it better myself. I couldn't have said it better myself about the leadership stuff. Awesome intro. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, of course. And for more information on Jamy, please check him out at jamybechler.com. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, it's not spelled how you would think. It is Jamy for Jamy and Bechler, BECHLER.com. Or you can follow him on Twitter at Coach Bechler, BECHLER. So the first thing I want to bring up, Jamy, this is the part that I think hit me number one, which is the idea that coaching, most people think that coaching is basically training or teaching, right? That's what it is. I'm training someone. I know how to do it. Do it the way I do it. Now you're good. I think most people think that, but you don't. In fact, you've gone as far as to say that type of coaching is actually selfish. Go down that road for me, please.
Yeah, I think we do get, I have friends. I know people in the space, in the coaching space. I use air quotes with that think if I'm telling you, Larry, if I'm telling you how to do things, then I'm coaching you, and that's just such a minute part of coaching. That's really just training. That's maybe teaching something. That's passing on information from me to you. But coaching is really taking you, helping you, coming alongside of you and helping you go from where you are to where you want to be or where you need to be. And that's going to be some give and take sometimes. And I think a lot of us do it wrong. I know me, I was a college basketball coach for 20 years. I know early on in my first head coaching job, I did this terribly. I thought that the best way to lead or the coach was to take all my information and tell you because I know better. They hired me to do this job and I'm smarter than you. Well, if we've watched like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the old movie, Ben Stein is that teacher, the smartest person in the room, but no one's paying attention because even though he's the smartest person, no one's inspired and he's not meeting them where they're at and then helping bring them to where they need to be. He's just regurgitating information. And that's what a lot of people do. But coaching is finding out what makes Larry tick, finding out what motivates him and how can I best facilitate his learning, but also facilitate his growth and development. And it really, to be honest, it takes work and it takes intentionality. Yes. And a lot of us as coaches, especially me and my first head coaching job, I didn't want to do that. I just want to tell you what to do as opposed to work within, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to hear your suggestions. And
you're the coach. So why are they talking?
I'm the coach and heaven forbid, I don't want to get inside your mind. I don't want to get messed up by thinking what you think, but you almost have to, in a way, to help people. And I think that that's what it's all about, is helping people and making people better.
So I want to tell a quick story about this. Years ago, I used to teach at the graduate school of Yale and Columbia. And I was at one Columbia class. And for those of you who don't know, the MBA class at Columbia filled with finance people. So one of the finance guys, many of the finance guys are super smart. It's just true. Many of them are very high IQ, right? For that kind of world, to be going to MBA finance world, a lot of high IQ people. But just because they have a high IQ doesn't mean they have a high EQ. They don't have emotional intelligence, but high IQ. So a guy's upset at me. He's like, Larry, you don't understand. I'm the smartest guy in the room. I don't want to be listening to these people. He's talking that way, right? And I said, great, two things. One, think about this. Don't you want to be the kind of leader that the smart people want to follow you? And two, what a horrible world it would be. Everyone on my team is smarter than me. Oh, woe is me. What a terrible world I live in when my entire team is brilliant. Isn't that what I want? And this is kind of what you're saying. You're saying that I don't have to be the best. I don't have to be the smartest. If I am, awesome, but not required. What's required is I can get the best and the smartest to do their best for me. Did I get that right?
Yeah, we all need other people. We're not perfect. We're not in heaven. We're not perfect. We have gaps, we have faults, we have things that we need to
Mm-hmm.
improve on, and other people can fill those gaps. Other people can complement the areas
Yes.
that we can't do as well. Or even if we do those areas well, we just have so much time and energy. We can't do everything. And that's the same with a coach, or more specifically, a leader. Anyone
Yes.
that's in any kind of a leadership position or has any kind of status, you can't do it by yourself. And we struggle with that as people a lot of times as leaders, because
Yep.
we want, and even as parents, we want, just do what I tell you to do. We want
Yes.
compliant followers. I'm the
Yes.
head honcho. I'm the chief here. Just be the Indian. Just be the person that does what I tell you to do. And that's so outdated. That doesn't work. And I'm not sure it ever really worked great, but
Mm-hmm.
we can't just be trying to get compliant followers, because that's not going to build a great team, a great
Yep.
family, a great anything. We need to be looking to develop other leaders. We need to develop the potential that other people have, so that they take ownership in whatever it is that we have, whether it's a country, whether it's an organization, or whether it's a family system.
It reminds me, have you ever heard of the diplomat Wayne, not diplomat, he was diplomat and author Wayne Gertmanian. He was popular in like the 80s or 90s.
No.
He wrote a book called Everything's Negotiable, and he tells a very important story. He says, the most important thing to remember is, if everyone is doing exactly what you tell them to do, now you're in trouble, because then no one's thinking, and you can't be everywhere. And you want people who can think on their own and be talented and all those things, right? And why that connected to me so much is, I remember as a Marine, I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years. We were always taught, go do, right? Go do. There was a saying we used all the time, which was good initiative, poor judgment. So we never wanted to stifle the initiative. We wanted to get you to have better judgment. So stop screwing up, but don't stop doing stuff. Right. So that idea really stuck with me. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying. You want to motivate people to go do. They don't have to do exactly as you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want them to not just do it because I said so, or even a lot of times as coaches, and this isn't a bad phrase, but we will say we want buy-in. I want Larry to
Yes.
buy into what I'm saying. I don't think that that's a wrong phrase. I don't think it's a bad sentiment, but I do think sometimes we talk too much about buy-in, which is really
Mm.
more just, I'm trying to convince Larry of something. I'm trying to
Yes.
persuade Larry. Well, we should be trying to get Larry to take ownership, that he feels like, man, this is our decision. This is our family. This is our team, whatever it is, as opposed to just, oh, this is Coach Bechler's team, or this is Jamie's team,
Right.
or Jamie's decision. Yeah, I buy
Right.
into it. Yeah, I agree with him, but it's still his decision.
Right.
And I think we would have a lot more success in whatever we're doing, because we're going to be doing things together, where you have people more 100% all in on something. I would rather have people 100% all in than people 100% bought in. And I know that's,
Yes.
I
No,
know
I
we're
agree.
splitting hairs.
No, I'm getting it.
But just that framework, just changing that framework just a little bit, I think then I now am more concerned about what Larry's thinking. And obviously we can't walk around on eggshells and have votes about every single decision. And I can't weigh everybody's opinion 100% equal all the time. I get
Right.
that. But it's just that mindset of, I need to consider what Larry's thinking. But man,
Mm.
if Larry can feel like this is our thing, we, us, ours. If he can feel like it's
Yes.
our thing, then he's going to be so much more committed to what we're doing. And when we lose, it's going to hurt him more. When we win,
Yeah.
he's going to celebrate. And that goes for bench players. That goes for people that are, custodians at a business, or people that, don't get paid very much. They're going to feel like they're part of everything that's going on, win or lose, when they're more invested in the process.
Well, I'm going to go even further than that. That sometimes you as the coach aren't sure how to fix the problem. And somebody might say, "Hey coach, I now know," because they have ownership. So they don't just go, "Well, that's Coach Bechler's problem, not mine." They don't do that. They go, "No, this is our problem. And I now know how to fix it. So I have an idea at least. So I can go talk to the coach and now he'll listen to me because I'm paying attention. I'm trying to make this thing work." So I think that's a secondary piece to that, right?
Yeah. Well, how many times have people been standing around the proverbial water cooler or in the break room, or they go out to lunch and they're essentially saying, well, Larry's the boss, he'll fix it. And they have that
Yep.
opinion because Larry's never brought them in on stuff.
Never.
They don't feel like what happens with that business is them.
Yep.
It's a reflection of Larry. Larry's did a stupid decision. That email was terrible, or that hiring was terrible. Larry did a terrible job. So that's on him.
It's on him.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed. So let me then go to the next piece then, which is, a coach isn't always a great coach isn't always a great player. A great player isn't always a great coach, right? Sometimes the skill sets are very different. They overlap sometimes, but generally speaking, when it comes to the championship level, it is rare to have a championship player also be a championship coach and a championship coach also be a championship player. That's very rare. So with that in mind, shouldn't we be thinking differently about our leaders?
Well, I would say we should be thinking about our leaders differently in general.
Okay.
We put way too much stock in status or a
Mm,
position, and we elevate people that haven't earned a chance to lead us. They haven't earned our respect, and they haven't earned the ability for us to give them some influence over our life. But what you're saying specifically, there's two types of great players, or two types of really talented players often.
okay.
And they can be both. They could be both, but the one is the one that everything comes natural to them. They step
Mm,
on the field of competition and everything is natural. They're like at a higher level than everybody else. The other one is the one that has a work ethic that's beyond everybody else. Now they have to have talent.
oh, gotcha.
They
Okay.
have to have talent. There's no great players that just are not talented, but they work hard. Those aren't great players. But there are some people out there. There's people in the Hall of Fames that were very talented, maybe didn't have a great work ethic. But then there's also talented people that had amazing work ethics. But
Sure.
anyways,
Sure.
both of those kinds of people struggle with the everyday Jamies or the everyday Larrys to coach them
Right.
because they can't relate to that. Because the one that everything was easy, well, they can't relate to, well, why isn't it easy for you? Like I just was able to do this. I see this happen and I can go do it. The other person, they can't understand why somebody isn't in there at 4 a.m. and
Right.
why
Right. Right. Right.
someone
Right. Right.
isn't the first there, the last to leave, and does a little bit extra. They can't understand why you wouldn't, like, you're getting paid for this, or you're on scholarship, or why doesn't this mean enough to you? They can't understand that because they're just like a Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe Bryant is one of the hardest workers of all time. He was very, very narrow focused. Like, you rarely saw him do commercials. You rarely saw him,
Mm,
hobnobbing with celebrities while he was a player. He was strictly focused. And he even struggled with his teammates because his teammates,
okay.
even the hard workers on his team, still fall way short of the Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality. So those kinds of people sometimes really struggle to lead others or to coach others because they can't get outside of themselves and see other perspectives. And I would say, just in general, people struggle with seeing other perspectives. People
Yeah.
struggle with seeing points of view, whether you're a great player or not a great player, whether you can't play a sport at all or you play all the sports. We struggle with seeing other people's perspectives and understanding other people.
Well, I would even argue that sometimes we can't see our own, right? That sometimes it's easier to see someone else's problems than it is our own sometimes, right? The idea the coach can't coach themselves. What's that old saying? The contractor's house is a disaster, right? But everybody else's house he fixes is awesome, but his own house is a disaster. He can't fix his own thing, right? So, I mean, I think coaches, I mean, kind of what you're doing now is
Mhm.
kind of coaching the coach, right? Which is a
Yeah.
challenging thing to do.
Yeah, we're trying to lead leaders, coach coaches, so that then they can have a better impact, a more positive impact on the mainly the student athletes. I do some work with professional, but mainly it's with young people, so teenagers or college age students, student athletes, and that's our whole goal. Is
Mhm.
I want Larry to be a better coach, not so he gets a raise, not so he goes in a Hall of Fame, but so that he can impact the student athletes that he's
Got it.
privileged to deal with. Because, and in a minute we can sit in a circle and sing "Kumbaya," but my thing is
It's nice.
these kids, these students that you're dealing with now are going to be in the community 10 or 15 years later. So your community is
Yes.
better or worse based upon what you're doing now with these young people. And so I want Larry to be a better coach, a better leader, and not make it about himself so that these student athletes can be better, so that your community can be better down the road.
So, with that in mind, there's obviously reasons why you've decided to go down this route, reasons why you've spent so much time with student athletes. You could, if you wanted to, have made a shift and trying to go heavily more professional. You could have made try to gone that route. That was an option for you. You chose not to. Is it? Is there something in your own life? I mean, I'll bring this up because I know you were a counselor for a Billy Graham crusade. Was that something that affected you that made you decide I want to help the youth, or no, was that just completely a separate thing?
Well, for anyone that's really familiar with Billy Graham and you know what he did as an evangelist, you know, he's trying to preach the good news. He's trying to let
Mhm.
people know about Jesus Christ and with the hope of people accepting Jesus as their savior. So his goal, you know, to make it a more general is he's trying to help people. He feels like he
Mhm.
has a the good news and he wants to share that and help people.
Right.
Certainly me being a part of that, I agreed with that, and I
Sure.
also wanted to help people. I that's one of the reasons I wanted to get into coaching. Now, when I was a counselor at a Billy Graham crusade in Cleveland, Ohio, I was actually a college student at the time. So I
Oh,
had
okay. I
not
didn't know
gotten
that.
into coaching yet. Yeah, I was
Okay.
actually a college student, and I actually was in a leg brace. I was on crutches because I had blown out my knee shortly
Wow.
before that. But I was, you know, I was there every night at Old Cleveland Stadium, and you know, I would go down, and when it was all said and done, when the sermon type thing, when the concert, all that stuff was over, I would go down and essentially help people share the gospel, share the Bible with people that felt like they needed that in their life. And so
So you were already in the help mode before you got into coaching. Like that was already in your head.
yeah, to a degree. Obviously I was a young person. You know, I'm 19, 20, 21, so I don't know what I don't know. But
Mhm.
I was president of Fellowship of Christian Athletes at my school, which was a very, very liberal school. So they were
Mhm.
it wasn't something that, you know, oh, well, you were at some Bible college, you know, it was easy. We were a small group of people trying to make a difference on our campus. But I knew I also wanted to be a coach and I wanted to give back
Mm.
to people like me, like my coaches had given into me and poured into me. I wanted to do that. I My faith was very important to me, but
Mhm.
I didn't want to go to Africa and translate Bibles. I didn't want to go
Right.
dig for water. I wanted to be a coach and help people as like a missionary on the basketball court. I know that sounds weird, but you know,
No, no, I get it.
I wanted to be not necessarily convert people, but I wanted to help people without going to Africa, without doing
Right.
that kind of stuff. I wanted to stay in the US and be involved in sports. But the Billy Graham crusade was awesome. And also what a lot of people don't understand is when Billy Graham would leave a town, they would take out this big full page ad like in the newspaper back when newspapers mattered, and they would have all their finances, they would have all this stuff because he wanted to be so above board and so um uh integrity meant so much to him. He didn't want to be one of these shisty preachers or these stereotypical people that you were wondering about. He wanted everything above board, you know,
Yeah.
and I know uh, he was somebody that would never meet with a female, you know, that wasn't his wife. He wouldn't meet with a female,
Yep.
just those two together. And I know a few years ago, Vice President Mike Pence got
I
criticized
remember I said the same thing. That's right.
for having
Yes.
the same opinion, which is really like I get it. You could be anti-Christian or you can be anti-Republican, anti-Democrat, or anti whoever says something, but you know, having somebody that feels like for them that's a show of integrity. Hey, I want to be faithful. This is fidelity to me. I thought that was a cool thing.
I got to tell you, people tease me. I have similar rules with my marriage. I have similar, I felt Pence was a little bit too much for me, right? That was too much for me. However, I do have similar rules. I don't put myself in situations to where things might not go the way I want them to go, right? So I do have similar, not the same. I do think Mr. Pence has gone a little bit too far for me, the vice president. However, I do understand where he's coming from, right? I do, and I'm not mad at him for it, right? That's how you feel you should do things. Go on with your bad self.
And I think that that's important. I think what you're saying is also important, because sometimes we'll judge or we'll say, well, that's not how I would do it. And so then we say, well, that's a bad thing because that's not how I would do it. Well, there's some things that are just bad, but then there's some things that are a matter of preference or opinion. And
cheating on your wife is bad. How you don't cheat on your wife is on you, right? However you achieve not doing that is good, whatever way you need to make that happen. But cheating on your wife is bad.
Yeah. And when, Vice President Pence was saying all that, I mean, he wasn't saying women are bad. He wasn't saying I'm above women or I'm above anyone else. He was just saying, essentially, my faith or my integrity, this is what I've determined for me. And
correct.
But then he gets criticized like, well, that's a bad thing. And that's not bad.
I'm a libertarian, right? I'm a libertarian. You do you. If that's what makes sense for you, it's fine. And if, I would go the opposite way. If him and his wife are like, hey, sleep with whoever you want to sleep with. If they both agree, then I'm okay with that too, right? You do you. I have no problem either way. Well, I want to walk down to one more line if I could. And this is the idea of treating people equally. What I mean by that is you bring up a very important point. What I've seen, right? I played high school football, right? So I played some team sports, right? I used to play PAL baseball when I lived in New York City. So I've done those things. And I remember something you mentioned, which really struck home for me, which is treating the first string and the second string and the fifth string all with respect. And I wasn't always first string, right? I'm not a small guy, but when it comes to football, I'm a small guy, right? The football players at my high school were monsters. I'm an average sized guy walking around, but on my football team, I was a little guy. So I would have liked to be treated normally, if that makes any sense. And I didn't. And it actually, I still remember, I mean, I'm in my 50s now, so it's been many years since I was on high school football, but I still remember, right? So when you said it, that's still stuff. I was a really good baseball player. So as a baseball player, I was first string and I was treated like I was awesome. But when I played football, I wasn't. And I remember the difference.
Yeah. Kind of my definition of success is being the best you're capable of being, achieving your potential, whatever that is. I believe that the definition of significance, or when I think of significance, is when you help someone else be successful. We all want to have value. We all want to be somebody, no matter who you are, no matter how talented you are in a certain skill. We want to be valued. And I believe, all right, say I was a basketball coach. I have 15 players. Obviously not all 15 players are equal in talent. They're not going to be equal in what I expect of them from a basketball standpoint, but each one of them is a son or a daughter. Each one of them has hopes and goals and dreams and fears. Each one of them is a person. And it kind of goes back to, once again, I hate to say that, kumbaya type stuff, but it goes back to my faith and doing a Billy Graham crusade or being a Christian camp counselor when I was in college or whatever. I believe that every person matters. Now, obviously not every player is the same talent wise, but every person on that bench. Now I'd like to say that I treated everybody equally at times, and I didn't, because I'm human and I screwed up. And especially as a young coach, I screwed up a lot as a young head coach. I was 27 years old, the youngest NCAA head coach, women's head coach in the country. I screwed up a lot. And then 4 years later, they allowed me to take my talents elsewhere, but I learned.
They cared about you.
I learned a lot though from that first head coaching job. But anyways, each one of those players wants to be successful. My job as a leader, as a coach, is to help them be as successful as they can, to help them reach their potential. Now, that might not be all conference, but that might just be, hey, when they do get the chance to go in, they don't mess up because I've prepared them. It might not be that they score 20 points and, get a game ball, but it might just be they're scared of messing up. Well, I've prepared
Yeah.
them and helped them, given them some confidence where they can go in their limited amount of time. They take advantage of that opportunity and they feel good about what they just did.
Well, I
But
got to
that's
tell you something. I'm going to go back to my high school football. Right, I was a pretty good baseball player as a younger kid, so I often did well. But as a football player, I wasn't that great. And I remember two things specifically. I was part of the team when we actually, and again, this is years ago. I was in high school, but I still remember it when we had a kickoff return, and I was part of the blocking team. We ran a touchdown from the kickoff return. Now, I didn't have the ball. I was one of the blockers, right? So, and I wasn't that fast. I would have never made that happen, right? But I was part of the team. And I still remember how good I felt being part of that play. That it's very rare, high school even, that someone
right.
gets a kickoff and then they run it back for a touchdown. I mean, that doesn't really happen, right? So it happened. And I was so happy being part of that. And I felt like I was one of the cool kids. Like I felt like I was one of the cool kids. And it still mattered to me.
Well, we do a bad job as leaders, whether we're in a company, whether we're a politician, whether we're a
Yes.
coach, a teacher. It doesn't matter. We do a bad job of bringing people in where they feel what we talked about earlier, ownership in the
Right.
result, but also because they take ownership in the result because they've invested in the process. So how
Right.
many times as a coach does a kid hit a shot, to win the game, at the buzzer, and the first person we mention to the media, or we high five that person that shot, or that's who we mention to the media? Well, what would it do to our team if we talked about the kid who set the screen? If that was the
Right.
first kid, or the kid that took the charge, on defense with 5 seconds to go, that even gave us the ball back to
Right.
allow. Now, when we're preaching the team all the time, now our actions are aligning with the words that are coming out of our mouth all week long. Or if we're praising the bench
Yes.
players for how much they encourage the starters during the game, or we're praising those slappies, the JV players or whatever that were practice dummies all week that got us ready for this big game. When we start praising those people and catch people being good, when we catch
Yep.
people being good and encourage them, now everybody else sees, oh, well, Larry is actually doing what he says he's going to
Right.
do. Coaches, leaders, we're so good at quote unquote setting the standard or telling everybody what to do, but oftentimes we don't be the standard. We don't
Yeah.
model
So
the standard
let
that we're
me
telling everybody to do.
let me do what I have to do here. I do a little bit of admin if I could. A little bit of admin I got to do. Guys, if you're liking what you're hearing, then do me a favor, hit that like button. It does matter. Every time I hit the like button, I get past those algorithms that constantly fight me and push me back. So please do that. If you happen to be watching this on Twitter, then do me a favor, retweet this right now. Just click retweet right now. If you're watching on Twitter, let people know that we're talking about this. It does matter completely. And something else, if you like what Jamie's talking about, then he showed up here. He didn't have to, he did. So help him out and go follow him. Follow him on Twitter over at Coach Bechler, Bechler. Follow him there to show that, hey, thanks for showing up and doing this and giving us a little bit of cool insight. So do that if you could. Lastly, you can support the show directly if you want to. My sponsors, theadvocates.org, the Advocate for Self-Government. If you want to head over there, please take the world's smallest political quiz, or take one of the surveys. There's a human respect survey. There's a bunch of the surveys. Take one of those surveys and then share your results. It's free. Take you a couple of minutes, but it's free. So you don't have to pay a dime. Supports this show, keeping my sponsors happy and me happy. So you've done it before, do it again. There's a bunch of surveys. Take another one. I don't care. Take any of them. Share it so that people see it. When you do that, what happens is people see it. People start having conversations. Others take the surveys, and everyone starts seeing the advocates and what we're trying to achieve with us having better self-government, being better people. Please, it's my sponsors. Help us out to the best of your ability. So let me keep going if I could. Because what I thought about when you just said that is, I still remember, again, I feel like I'm reliving my high school here. I still remember when we were making the blocks, my coach was a defensive coach. He literally yelled, "Damn good block." He yelled that at me when I made the block. And I was like, he said something nice about me. And I'm like second string guy, right? And he like said that. I was like, wow. So again, I remember it's 20 some odd, 30 years ago, maybe. And I'm still thinking about it. So yes, I guess I'm just reiterating what you said. But I want to then go one more spot here, and that is the idea of the one word story, which we often do. And it can be good and it can be bad. We title the person the one word. It could be negative, like, oh, you know what? She's selfish, or he's lazy, or the reverse. She's a star, or he's the champ, or whatever. And now, because we give them the one word story, everyone else hears that and treats them differently. And we do also, right? I can't give the ball to him because he's a jerk, or I got to give the ball to her because she's the star, or whatever the case may be. I mean, how do we, as leaders, as coaches, how do we deal with that issue, which is natural for us?
Yeah, well, the very first thing is we have to get out of our own way with that. We have to change our mindset about that. And going back to my first head coaching job, that's all I would ever say. She's not committed, she's lazy, she's not mentally tough, or whatever, fill in the blank. Well, when you're doing that, you're not seeing the potential in somebody. You're only seeing that negative.
Mm,
Then it's going to be really tough for you to maximize their strengths. And most of us have strengths that need maximizing. Okay. And where I'm
yes.
going with this is, even in the coaching world, we will talk about, hey, I've got to make sure that Larry improves upon these three things. These are his weaknesses. And so
Yep.
this summer, we're going to work on Larry's weaknesses. Well, I'm not against working on the weaknesses, but sometimes our quote unquote strengths aren't fully developed. Sometimes we can do
Mm,
more with our strengths, or sometimes I can utilize your strengths in better ways for the team or the family structure or the community or whatever. But we get so focused on the negative just in general as people. And you could translate that into weaknesses of a player or things you got to
sure.
improve upon. And I understand that, but we're humans and we're always going to have some flaws. We're always going to have some weaknesses. I prefer to look at it as, and this isn't like me burying my head in the sand, but I prefer to look at, what can Larry do? What can he do well? And I know that plays into the one word thing that you're saying, but I'm
Right.
trying to, in a way, but I'm trying to find those good things that Larry does and pull those out of him so that he can use those even more. So
But what
he
you're
can,
saying is, I think it's different, right? What you're saying
yes.
is, what is Larry's strengths and weaknesses versus Larry is one thing. What you're talking about is actually making me a three-dimensional person,
Yeah.
right? I've got this strength, this thing that works well. I work on this, not work on that, whatever. I'm saying that when we do the one-word story, you become two-dimensional.
Well, yeah, because I think that there's more to Larry than just, and that's what you're saying too. There's more to
Right.
Larry than just that one word. But
Bingo.
oftentimes we tend to use the one word from a negative standpoint. That's how
Yeah, it's
most of
true.
us are.
Yeah,
But you
good point.
you even said, though, the flip side, sometimes you use it from a good standpoint. But let's take Steph Curry, amazing NBA player, Steph Curry.
Mhm.
Most of the time when people think of Steph Curry, they say amazing shooter.
Yep.
That's a positive thing. That's awesome. He's one of the greatest shooters of all time. Well, the more we say that and address that one word or that one phrase to him, the more we box him in and pigeonhole him.
Yes.
Where now, even though that's a strength and a positive, we're not able to utilize him fully,
Right.
maximize all of his strengths that he might have. Or even if we say, now Steph Curry doesn't have many weaknesses as a shooter, but take a high school kid or a college kid.
Sure.
Oh, he's a great shooter. Larry's a great shooter. Well, is Larry a great shooter off the dribble? Is Larry a great shooter if
Mm,
the ball's coming from his left or coming from his right or coming straight on or coming off of a screen? There's so many different ways that he can get a shot off. Is he great at all those? Well, no. Well, okay, let's take his strength and let's make what he does good even better. So let's
right.
max. So when we say Larry's a great shooter, then we tend to say, well, then he's perfect at that. We tend to
Right.
overvalue that. Well, we can still maximize a lot of different ways. So I'm saying all this, there's a lot of dynamics to consider. And definitely when we pigeonhole or box someone in, I think we're doing them a disservice, whether it's good or bad.
So let me then move a little bit, if I could, to the value of team sports outside of team sports, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we're going from coach to leader. Leaders should be coaches. I mean, many of things are true. And I think was it Sheryl Sandberg, I think, who wrote the book Lean In,
Yep.
and she was talking about the value she had, for team sports. And I try to get my daughters to play. I have two daughters to play team sports. I knew that, generally speaking, still in today's world, much easier for boys to play team sports than girls. Many more options. Naturally, people do it. They always assume boys will do so, and I did when I was a kid. I played baseball, I played hockey, and I played football. So I played a lot of team sports when I was a kid. But my daughters didn't have the same opportunity, so I kind of gave them a little bit of a nudge. I was my daughter's basketball coach for a little bit. She played basketball for a while, and she didn't really like it. But now she's older. She's in college now. But when she played, she was young, 11, 12, 13, 14, that young age. She still looks back at it like, Dad, I'm glad I played. Like, she still has, even though then she was like, do we have to get up and practice, right? She didn't want to do any of that stuff. But she looks back at it now with like, I'm glad I did it. I feel like team sports is underrated in the value it has outside of sports. Am I wrong with this?
No, I think you're spot on. Now the hope is that you have a coach that's promoting the positive values of team sport and that's
Mm,
living up to it. So not just promoting those values, but are living out those values and
got it.
modeling those values rather than what I said earlier, just setting the standard or setting the rules and guidelines, but they're
Right.
actually, their actions are aligning with their words. But yeah, the team sport aspect, obviously I'm biased. I was involved in team sports my whole life. But
Sure.
even, I work with tennis players, tennis teams and golf teams, which are individual, quote unquote, individual type sports, but they're still needing to root for one another. They're still needing to support one another. They're competing with one another from a positive competition to make each other better. Almost a rising tide lifts all ships. So any
Right.
of those sports, I think can really help people to develop a framework where they understand, hey, we need each other. I can't do it by myself. Now,
Yes.
there's plenty of bad CEOs, there's plenty of bad politicians, there's plenty of bad leaders out there that played team sports all their life. So team sports isn't
True.
necessarily
It's not
a
magic.
no, it's not.
Right.
But you have the opportunity to learn things quicker than somebody that maybe isn't in team sports. It can become more natural for you to
Right.
work within a system or work within, hey, I know that I can't do it myself. I need Larry to help me out, or Larry's going to provide some expertise or areas or fill in the gaps where I just can't. I'm not as strong at.
I completely agree, and I think this goes down to my political issue here, which is the lockdowns. The lockdowns from COVID. I mean, it crushed so many people who were doing team sports. I mean, sports in general, but I'm bringing up team sports specifically. Now you can't go practice, or now your playoff is canceled, and if you're a professional athlete making 6 7 figures 8 figures a year, you'll be fine, right? You can miss a year, or you'll be fine. But you're 15, 16, 17, 18. These are critical years for you, and you lose 1 year that in theory could be your entire career, or whatever, your ability to become a champion. Even if you don't go professional, being a champion does stay with you. I mean, again, you're making me relive my high school. We went 8-0, right? I still remember that. Like, that mattered to me. We were awesome, right? We were a good team. I still remember that. And I think that people, when they have a chance to become a champion, or at least play championship, deal with that pressure, right? The pressure of having to win on any given day, right? Having to do that. I feel like losing that really could have hurt. Am I off on this one?
No, uh, you know, the I obviously dealt with a lot of or worked with a lot of coaches, a lot of teams, and they were struggling during
Yeah.
this time for in a lot of different ways. But the biggest the biggest problem I had with the whole thing was the lack of discussion, the lack of dialogue, the lack of conversation
Yes.
about team
Yes.
sports, about athletics in high school and college. And we were doing a lot of paint by numbers. We were painting with a broad brush and treating everything equally. in terms of, well, we've got to protect these kids from this virus. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not a scientist, so I don't know all the ins and outs of everything. But the problem is nobody knew it because we weren't allowed to talk about it. We weren't allowed to bring up issues. So we were
Yes.
treating a nursing home the same as we were treating a 16-year-old football team. You know, we were
Yes.
putting essentially the same rules and guidelines on them without having a conversation. So that was the number one thing, was just overall conversation. Number two thing, and you may not see this if you're at a private school or an uppity type school or whatever, but how many schools, how many athletes out there across this country, and obviously there's never going to be data on this, so you can't prove it. It's just speculation, but how many kids, the only thing keeping them out of jail or keeping them in school is that they're in sports. And
100%. I
and the
cannot
only
tell you yes, yes, and yes.
and the
I
only
came
thing
out of the South Bronx.
yeah,
I understand this completely.
some
Yes.
kids, the only reason they go to so and so's math class in high school and sit there and get a 2.0 is so they can play football. That's the
Absolutely.
only reason. And when you take that away, and like I said, you there's no science, like there's no numbers. You can't say, well, this many kids turned to drugs and crime because they didn't have football or basketball. There's not numbers like that. But I know, and you know, Larry, the
100%.
reality of the situation is there's a lot of kids like that. And
100%.
so we say, well, we're going to protect people by shutting down sports. Well, are you protecting when those gang members or those kids, you know, turn to crime, or are you protecting those kids who end up, you know, I forget the number. There was a number about how many kids never went back to school, you
Yes.
know,
4 million.
a
4
crazy number.
million.
Well, how many of them are athletes? So they never graduated because they didn't have the coach there. The coach wasn't allowed to work with them and be hands-on of getting them to
I
class.
can't tell you how many young men use their coaches as father figures. So many, particularly in tough neighborhoods where a lot of the fathers are in jail, right? Particularly in those neighborhoods, the coach becomes almost like a surrogate father figure for a lot of these young men. And all of a sudden you take that away from them. You're right. They go to the gang. They're looking for positive male role models. If they can't get positive, they'll take whatever. They need role models. And if you
Yeah.
don't give them good ones, they take bad ones.
Well, that and my opinion on that, or my take on that, is even before that. That's not even getting into whatever I thought about the actual lockdowns or COVID or anything like that. It's just
Sure.
we couldn't have a discussion. We never brought this stuff
Right.
up. And then all of a sudden it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We're essentially saying just shut up and do what I tell you to do. You know,
Right.
and it's like, wait a minute, you're leaders. You're supposed to be the smart people. You're supposed to be helping. Like, you're saying you're doing this to help, but are
Not
you
helping.
really helping? I don't know,
No.
because we're not even allowed to have a discussion.
Correct. Correct.
And these are
Absolutely.
kids too, because, and you know
So
as well as I do, these kids are our future, you know, and so what are we teaching them? Number one, but when we shut down everything, we lose the opportunity to develop them to their fullest. We're not going to develop kids over Zoom, you know,
right.
to their fullest, you know, if it's prolonged. So I just thought we should have had more conversation about that.
Agreed 100%. And we should have been worried about, we should have had people say, wait a minute, you're worried about X. What about Y? What about Z? Which one's more important here or there? How can we make these work? I completely agree. This goes to the next piece, which is what you talked about, trust, right? We're losing trust in our institutions. So now where do we find trust, right? Where do we find that? And I think part of being a good leader or being a good coach is building trust, right? And here I show up, I'm the new coach. They don't know me, they don't trust me. But the same thing happens in business. I'm the new manager, I'm the new leader, I'm the new vice president of sales, right? I'm the new whatever. You got to start with building trust and finding out people's why. And I think that when you just give orders and you don't connect, you actually lose trust. That's just my view. I mean, some people may think I'm crazy with that, but I think if you're not finding out the why and asking questions, I feel like you're losing trust. I mean, am I wrong here?
You're 100% right. We've got to be putting these, depositing in this emotional bank account. We all have bank accounts, real bank accounts. Some of them are bigger than others, but if we want to withdraw money, we've got to put money in. If we
Right.
want to get some trust out of somebody, well, we've got to be putting in some emotional credits or emotional deposits. It
But
can't just be
Jamie, hold on one second. You watch the TV shows and the movies, and the coach comes in and says, "There's a new sheriff in town, and now we're doing things my way, and you shut up and you do this." And then we won the championship, right? Like that's the TV show that when we're watching the 8 o'clock movie, right? That's what they show us. And I know from business, that's not how it works. When
my
you
fa-
walk into that, you got a mutiny. You don't have a success, you got a mutiny.
my
So
favorite my favorite movie.
go
Favorite
ahead.
movie of all time is Hoosiers, and that's what Gene Hackman's character does. Walks in on the interim coach. Your coaching days are over, you know,
Right.
and they win the championship.
Of
Hollywood.
course.
But I spent, I don't know how much time I spent my first head coaching job telling the players, you got to trust me. Trust me. They wouldn't have hired me they hired me for a reason. I know my stuff. This is what Pat Summit's doing. This is what Coach K is doing. Trust me, this stuff works. Well, I was begging and asking them for trust without earning it. I went in there, you
Mm.
know, essentially, I didn't do this, but essentially you're slapping down your news articles, your scrapbook, your resume. Oh, see, I
Right.
belong, oh, no, that's not how you get trust. You get trust based upon connecting with people, and
Right.
it's not even a popularity contest. It's just trusting that Larry's going to trust Jamy, that when Jamy says something, number one, he's going to do it. Number two, he means it. Or, you could say number one, he means it. Number two, he's going to do it. But then
Right.
I don't have an ulterior motive. If I ask Larry to do
Right.
something, it's not so that Jamy can look good, or there's no ulterior motive here. But we have so many, I mean, shoot, you go back, uh, a great movie, White Christmas. All right. Everybody loves White Christmas. Well, even in that movie, they're talking about everybody has an angle. Everybody has an angle.
Mm.
They're
Right.
sitting around meeting the sisters or the girls for the first time. Well, what's their angle? Everyone's got an angle.
Right.
So even back then, that's what people think. And now more than ever, probably, well, what's his angle? What's his reason for doing this? And quite frankly, there's good reason people have those.
Sure.
They're skeptical because we are constantly leaders using our power for our good, as opposed to using our power to help others, to make others better, to make the situation better. We're using our power to make us better.
So let me grab a couple comments if I could. Some people are commenting here just so I can grab a couple of them. John says, in sports, a right-handed coach can't make a lefty bat the same as a righty. He needs to work with individuals, differences, just as in the business world. And this is earlier what you were talking about, right? You don't have to be the best at the thing to pull the best out of somebody, right?
Yeah. I made a living at the small college level with scholarships, small college basketball, but we were successful because I took kids that other people said, well, they can't dribble with their left hand, or they can't do X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, yeah, but they can do this really well, or they can do this really well. And you know what? It's my job as the coach to put them in positions to succeed, to maximize their strength, to minimize their weakness. If they can't dribble with their left hand, well, then why am I going to have them catching the ball and having to dribble with their left hand, if at
Right.
all possible? So I think good leaders find ways to help their people to succeed. And yeah, you can't totally change a person necessarily, but you can make people better.
Right.
And I think we don't do that enough as leaders. We don't look for ways. How can I help Larry to be the best that he possibly can?
Well, I bring this up often in when I'm dealing with businesses, right? People will say, I have a bunch of bad employees. And I'll say, you might, but the odds are you don't. The odds are, I mean, there are some bad employees. They exist. However, they're far fewer than people believe. The reality of it is most of the time, they're either in the wrong job or they're being led poorly. One of those two things is usually the truth. Again, there are some bad employees. They do exist, but they're far fewer. And if good leaders have to be able to lead well and, or to your point, put people in the right jobs. Most of the time, people who are bad employees are really just in the wrong job.
Well, we love to point fingers as leaders. We love
Oh,
to
yes.
play one of our favorite games, no matter what sport we coach, our favorite game is the blame game. Whose
Yes.
fault it is. I I'm not as concerned about whose fault it is. Obviously, there needs to be correction when something doesn't work, and you need to figure out why it didn't work. How can we correct it? But that's slightly different than just playing the blame game and saying, well, it's Larry's fault. If Larry makes a turnover at the end of a basketball game, yeah, it wasn't my fault as the leader that he dribbled it off his foot. But did I do everything possible to put him in a position to succeed? Maybe he shouldn't even
Mm,
been on the basketball floor at that time. Maybe he shouldn't have caught the ball where he did. Maybe my play should have had him catching the ball somewhere else. Maybe someone else should have caught the ball. Maybe I should have prepared him in practice for what he was going to
mm.
face. So it might not be my fault as a leader, but it's 100% always my responsibility. It's my
Yes.
responsibility to prepare Larry to be his best. But then, even if I didn't quite do that, now moving forward, how can I prepare him to be his best later on? And we see this all the time. And I know your world is politics and business. You see this all the time. Something
Yep.
happens, and our first instinct as a leader is whose fault it is. Well, you
Right.
never hear leaders take responsibility for anything. It's like you're in charge of whatever it is. You're in charge of the
Yep.
town, you're in charge of the company, you're in
Yep.
charge of the country. Who else does it? The buck stops here.
I remember when was running for office a couple of times, my team would make a mistake on social media, do something they shouldn't have done, say something they shouldn't have said, post something they shouldn't post, whatever the case may be. And what I would openly say to everybody, because the first thing to say is, you got to fire them. They're terrible, blah, blah, blah. And the first thing I'm going to say is, no, it's my responsibility. You want to get mad at somebody, get mad at me, and I'm not firing them. They learned their lesson. Why would I punish someone like that? There's a thing I talk about in business. There's a story like, there's a guy who makes a $40,000 mistake, and the boss says, I got to fire him. And I said, why? He made a $40,000 mistake. So you just spent $40,000 to train him, and you're gonna give him to somebody else.
Yeah.
That makes no sense at all. You just spent $40,000 to train this guy, and now you're going to give him to somebody else. It doesn't make any sense. And I think it goes back to the point of responsibility. Now, is that the one guy who's the bad employee? Maybe it is, right? And hopefully, as a leader, if you do find the one real bad employee, you get rid of them. But to our point earlier, we were talking about, most of them aren't bad employees. Most of them aren't. So
Yeah.
yes, I agree completely.
Even if they have a bad attitude, we say, well,
Mm,
this person's a cancer. Well, let's examine that a little bit more. Why are they a cancer? Well,
right.
in my world, of sports, a lot of times it's, well, they're not getting playing time or they're a selfish
Mm,
player. Okay, well, have you communicated your expectations to them enough? Did you, like,
right.
for me, I was a college coach, so we recruited kids. Did you communicate expectations during the recruitment process? Have you
Right.
changed your mind? Have you been very inconsistent as a coach? Do they not know? Like, are you a tumbleweed in Texas? Whichever way the wind blows, that's which way your decisions go.
Right.
Are you contributing to them being a bad attitude? And then the second thing, and this is a little bit more deeper, but you know, if you get rid of that bad attitude, your second worst attitude now becomes your worst attitude.
Right. Right.
So
Yes.
so maybe you have a culture that you've contributed to, just a bad culture in general.
Right.
Maybe it's not that one kid. Maybe you have a number of kids that are bad, but that one kid or that one employee is just the worst. But really, the problem is your culture that you've facilitated and developed.
Absolutely. Patty says you have to be a team player no matter where you work, even in maintenance, whether at the
Mhm.
hospital, school, hotel, office, restaurant. Most businesses would shut down if the maintenance team didn't work. And I think she's right. I mean, no matter what, you want to have, and something else I'll add. I think humans want to be part of a good team, right? Like we desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Am I right here?
Yeah, every school I coached at, and even when I was an athletic director, some of the people that I spent the most time with was the custodians or the maintenance workers,
Mm,
the people who made things happen, the people that you really can't live without. But they're sometimes the lowest paid people in a school, and yet they're some of the most valuable. And I tried to give them shirts, I tried to give them extra food whenever possible. Plus,
right.
my dad was a maintenance worker at Hillsdale College in Michigan, and he was like the fix it all guy. He was the guy that
Right.
everyone went to fix whatever. And I saw how he worked and his work ethic. And I saw, these are quote unquote the people that don't have status. But
Right.
man, things don't operate, things don't go well. The president can't do his job if the maintenance guys or the custodians aren't doing their job.
Absolutely. Let me do, if I could, a little bit of admin one more time. Guys, if you're liking what you're hearing, then please click that like button. Clicking the like button does matter. If you're watching this on Twitter, please retweet this. Right now, click that retweet button so people can see it. It does matter. It helps us get past the algorithms. You know that we got to keep pushing this stuff forward. So please do it if you can. Support my sponsors, theadvocates.org. If you haven't taken the world's smallest political quiz, what's wrong with you? I ask you every show. Do you have like a problem? You're the bad employee. See that, Jamie? They're the bad employees. Go and take the damn test. It's easy. It's a minute. You can share it. Take the human respect test. Take any of the surveys. Take one of them. It's free. It's like 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes to take one of these surveys. Please do it and share your results. It does matter. It's free and it supports the show. Please help me out. The Advocate for Self-Government. As you share it, people start talking. Some of you watch it, you see, you pop it up on Twitter or Facebook. People start saying, what's that? What's going on? They take it. These are the conversations I want us to have. So please, let's make this happen if we can. And also, let's show some respect for Jamy. He showed up today to give us some cool stuff. Follow him. You can check out his website at jamybechler.com. If you're listening to this in the podcast, JamyBechler.com, or follow him on Twitter at Coach Bechler on Twitter. So I like what you're talking about. I want to go, if I could, to one more piece, and it's the idea of follow-up. The reason why follow-up, I think, is so critical. You focus on it. That's one of your big deals, is follow-up. I see follow-up as a way of building trust, right? Because I tell you, Jamie, I care about you, so important. Then I ignore you for 6 months. Well, how much do I care about you, right? But if I tell you that I care about you, and then every week I'm asking, what's going on? How do we fix this? Now that follow-up shows, oh, Larry's not full of it. Larry's serious. He actually does care. And I start building that trust. That's number one. But number two, I feel like follow-up also gets people in the right mode. Like they start thinking, oh, I have to constantly do. I can't just show up and be super cool one day and then not do anything until the next game or something, right? I think it goes both ways. Is that why you push that, or am I missing something?
Oh, a lot of times the things I push or emphasize are the things that my wife says I need to do better at. No,
There we go.
I'm normally talking to myself. I'm normally anything I say, it's what I need to hear as well, or what I needed to hear when I was a young coach or a young leader. But the follow-up piece, I wish I did it better. I'm constantly kicking myself because I don't do it as well as I know that I should. But I read this book years and years ago, and it's one of my favorite books. It had a profound impact on my life, but it's called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty by a guy named Harvey McKay. Dig your well before you're thirsty. But he starts that book off with a story, and I forget the specific details, but this person had some financial trouble and needed like $10,000 or $15,000 like immediately. And the story goes, he called up all these people that could give him the money, but they hadn't heard from him in forever.
Right.
And so kind of that was the springboard to the book of dig your well before you're thirsty, or you could say, fix your roof before it rains. But, do we have people in our life that we can count on? Well, you can't count on people if you're never following up, if you're never keeping tabs on them, or never having a relationship. If you only, like sales, Larry, you've done a lot with sales in your career. If the only time a person hears from you, a customer hears from you, is when you're trying to make the sale, they're going to start to wonder, this is more of a transactional type thing. I don't know if Larry really cares about me. And so the more you can follow up with people, and the more that it doesn't have to be, I'm going to call Larry, once a week and we're going to have an hour conversation.
Right.
But we've all had these situations where we call up an old friend, or we call up a relative we haven't talked to for a long time, and it's like a 2-hour conversation.
Right.
And then the next time you talk to them, it's a year later, you have another 2-hour conversation. It's like, well, man, if I would call them like once a month, It'd only be
Right.
like it'd be a 20-minute conversation maybe, and we'd feel better about our relationship. It
Right.
wouldn't be catching up all the time. So I do think the more we can look at follow up, and it's got to be intentional. Maybe you're
Mm,
setting reminders on your calendar, and it could be personal or professional, but it's so crucial to follow up or to keep connecting with people. And when you talk about connecting with people, I think of like a tailor. And I don't go to a tailor, but other people go to a tailor. They go in there, the tailor measures them, all this
yep.
kind of stuff, and gets the perfect suit for that person. Well, if I go into that tailor a year later, the tailor doesn't go, "Oh, Jamie, good to see you. Here's a suit for you." It's like I could have went to a department store and gotten off the rack. No,
Right.
they measure you again because maybe your measurements have changed. When we fail to follow up, or when we don't keep in touch with people or connect with people on a regular basis, we're essentially going into that tailor uh, taking something off the rack. Well, I haven't
Right.
talked to Larry forever. Well, I'm going to call him up and everything should be good with him. Well, we haven't connected with him in the last year. Where that matters a lot is our people. Are we connecting with our people? Do we know what's going on in their lives? What their hopes and dreams are, what's going on with their family? All that kind of stuff matters because people want to feel like they're valued.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree. That's the thing I love about the follow-up piece is, that's you brought up something else though, right? It should be heartfelt, obviously, but it's okay if we use technology to help that along, right? It's not any. If I'm like, I got to remember to call my mom. I don't have to. My mom passed away, but in theory, right? If I'm going to call my mom, it's okay if I put an alarm every week on my phone so that I can call my mom. It's okay to use technology to spur things on, and I think sometimes we feel like that somehow cheapens it. I disagree. I think it's intentional. If I put the alarm so I call my
Mhm.
mom every week, that's intentional. I want to call my mom every week. I still think technology is an advantage and not a disadvantage.
No, we have to be intentional about everything. Whatever is important to us, we need to make that a priority in our lives. And the only way we can do that most of the time is to be intentional. And it doesn't matter if you're talking your spouse or your children or whatever you put in your calendar when they have a softball game or a soccer game or
Right.
a play. You put their birthdays in your calendar, not because you don't care about them and you're going to forget, but because life happens and you might
Right.
forget, or you may not forget on that day, but you forgot 3 days earlier, which is
Right.
when you needed to. Valentine's Day. All right, we just had Valentine's Day. I know
Yeah.
Valentine's Day every year, but what I don't remember is February 11th or February 12th when I better get those flowers or get that
That's
order
correct.
in or get
Or
those
get those reservations.
reservations. Yeah.
Yes.
So I need to put that in my calendar or else I'm going to forget that. Not because my wife's
Right.
not important or whatever, or not because I don't know Valentine's Day. I just forget Valentine's Day on February 11th.
Right. Well, I kind of want to wrap this up with something that is important for people who want to see kind of how you think. You have a website. It's the leadershipplaybook.com. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
The leadershipplaybook.com is kind of where you talk about how coaches can get coached, how coaches can use resources, and you talk about things like 2-minute videos and things like that to kind of get people motivated because you don't want to rely on others to motivate themselves. You want to be the one who helps to motivate them. So tell me about that website.
Yeah, that website is essentially the behind the paywall. It's essentially
Mm,
our curriculum, our online program for coaches, for sports teams, for athletes. We have thousands and thousands across the country utilizing it, and it's full of 2-minute video lessons for players and for coaches to get better at certain. We have all across the board. So we have really up to date situations that just happened. We have stories about Harriet Tubman and how she was such a
mm,
great leader, even though she had zero status in the age that she lives, but everybody knows who she is, not
right.
because she was a star WNBA player or a movie star, but because of her influence. So we have different ways of helping student athletes understand leadership and teamwork. And we keep it at 2 minutes. I don't have any science on that. I just think keeping it under 2 minutes was good. Plus, it
I like it.
originally stemmed from on our podcast. We have a 2-minute drill. So
Mm,
once a week
sure.
we have a 2-minute drill, like from football, and so we keep this episode on every Wednesday, we release a 2-minute drill. And so we want to do that. They should be like 7 seconds long, whatever their attention span is, but
there we go.
But I can't talk for just 7 seconds and get to a point in 7 seconds.
I like it. Well, guys, I want to say, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Jamy, thank you for giving us an hour of your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and appreciate the good work that you keep doing. Keep it up.
We are trying our best to make the world a better place. Guys, thank you so much. I will see you all very soon.